Okay, thank you, Professor Michel. Thanks, Dr. Contarsi and Dr. Santos. So my name is Fernando Nakayama. I will present the work entitled A Cross-Layer Adaptive Resilience Architecture for the Internet of Health Things Communication. My research advisor is Dr. Nogueira, and this presentation is a partial requirement for my doctoral qualification exam. This is the table of contents we will follow for this presentation. I will present the context and the introduction for this work. I'll define the problem. I'll introduce the thesis and the goals for this work. I'll provide some background information in order to support the presentation. I'll present the proposal for a novel resilient architecture for the IOHT communication and the works we have concluded so far that supports the architecture. And I will wrap up with my final considerations. So in the early 90s, the internet was a fixed network of computers, which has allowed the first million users to benefit from simple services, such as exchanging emails. The access points in user houses and public spaces were, in essence, the connected places. The main idea is that if you needed internet access, you had to go to one of those places. This started to change by the 2000s with the dissemination of devices such as connected phones and tablets, and especially with the new wireless communication technologies. So the internet has made possible to connect billions of users. These new users were engaged in rich social media events, and they could benefit from the extended available connectivity in multiple locations. It was then when we also started to connect multiple machines, objects, and devices to the internet. And those devices are things such as actuators, smart meters, and even robots. They surround us as we speak. However, the integration of the humans realm and the machines realm go beyond. The next evolution comprises the Internet of the wearable things. Wearable devices are small devices that are worn by humans, and they promote several new opportunities. In the same manner that IoT made possible applications such as smart homes and smart cities and improvements in industrial automation, by integrating the Internet of Things, the Internet of the wearable things to healthcare, rises the concept of the Internet of Health Things. The Internet of Health Things comprises implantable and wearable devices. Those devices connect among themselves and or to the Internet, and the overall objective is to improve healthcare. According to Wolf and Serpanos, 1/3 of the existing IoT devices are healthcare related. So considering also the healthcare organizations, about 87% are currently adopting IOHT. So that leads us to approximately 26 billion IOHT devices right now. The applications in IOHT consist mainly of an IOHT device that collects health-related data. The data is transferred to a coordinator device using some type of short-range communication technology such as NFC, Bluetooth, or Zigbee. The information is later transmitted to the internet through a communication gateway and is made available to granted users and also to healthcare professionals. And these applications include real-time monitoring of patients, tracking users' health during physical activities, and assisted living applications to monitor older adults. One of the main IOHT problems is the complex environment caused by the amount of users, devices, communication technologies, services, and applications. So let's assume, for example, 3 different scenarios where the users have multiple IOHT devices for different applications. The users also apply different communication technologies to transfer data to the internet, and each of the users' applications rely on different cloud healthcare providers to offer remote monitoring and also assistance to the users. Also, the remote monitoring of the users happens in different places and by distinct system users. So we can identify at least 3 very distinct segments in IOHT. From the user's perspectives, the IOHT works like this, with transparent data collection, information transmission, and remote monitoring by the granted users. However, from a solution developer considering IOHT services and applications, the perspective should be more like this. Another problem considering the IOHT environment is the lack of collaboration among the services. So considering the previous example, where 3 levels of services are identifiable, the sensing services comprise the IOHT devices and the collected data by those devices. The connectivity services comprise the communication among the sensing devices and also the communication with the internet gateway. Additionally, it relates to every communication involved in this process. And we have the end-to-end communication services that comprise the communication between the devices and the computing infrastructure in the internet. The problem is that those services lack coordination among themselves. And once we have 3 different services that provide no bonds with each other, we also provide detached solutions. A different problem is that the IOHT includes applications with mixed criticality. So depending on the criticality, such as life-threatening events, the requirements are significantly different for the applications, even though they can share part or even a complete set of resources. So our thesis is that it is feasible to achieve adaptive resilience for communication while preserving network performance for applications in multi-layered and mobile environments like the IOHT. In order to support the thesis, we formulated 2 research questions. Each of the questions investigates a particular aspect, such as requirements, designs, and evaluation of a potential adaptive resilience model that suits IOHT. So our first research question is, what are the key applications and requirements for modeling adaptive communication management in IOHT-based services? And our second research question is how to develop an adaptive solution considering communication security and performance aspects and the multi-layer characteristics of IOHT. As we have seen, the IOHT provides an environment with multiple services and low or eventually no integration among those services. Our goal is to increase communication resilience and also to provide a higher level of integration and collaboration among the IOHT services. Our objectives include increasing the communication resilience and also to promote the continuous delivery of essential services while we attain the application requirements, the service level agreements, some type of mitigation and recovery from the threats, and adaptation throughout the essential services. So next, I will provide some background information regarding the resilience disciplines, the IOHT applications and requirements, and also the long-term resilience for IOHT. So the resilience concept in our work follows the classification proposed by Avizienis and Laprie. Resilience is the persistence of service delivery that can justifiably be trusted when facing changes. And this is also the original concept for the dependability. And later, it was integrated by the security attributes composing the framework of dependable computing. The dependability property of a system comprises the following attributes: reliability, safety, maintainability, availability, and integrity. And security adds the confidentiality to them. Apart from the resilience attribute, the dependability and security tree encompasses the threats to resilience and also the approach to promote resilience. So considering the threats, we have failure, errors, and faults. A failure happens when a system deviates from its normal behavior, and it's caused by an unpredicted state of the system components. This state is known as an error, and the cause of an error is called the fault. And the approaches to deal with faults include prevention, tolerance, removal, and forecasting of faults. The techniques for resilient IOHT include detection and diagnosis mechanisms. Monitoring is employed in the field of runtime verification, where information is obtained from a running system, and it represents a finite trace of temporal behavior. And in the computational security field, the term intrusion detection relates to detecting break-ins, penetrations, and other forms of computer abuse. There are two main types of intrusion detection mechanisms. The signature-based models compare predefined behavior to identify abnormal events. And the anomaly-based techniques rely on statistical analysis to identify the anomalies. And more recently, machine learning and data mining techniques have also been employed when there is no specific domain of knowledge. During the development, a system can be adapted by changing its components, architecture, and parameters. So if those changes are shifted from the development time to the runtime, the system is defined as adaptive. So the actions for adaptive runtime reconfiguration of systems comprise mitigation or recovery methods. The mitigation and recovery methods consider reparameterization that involves the reconfiguration of one or more components to preserve the system functionalities through the optimization and rule-based mechanisms. Runtime enforcement, where an enforcer halts an action whenever it deviates from a safety requirement. And redundancy comprises a set of approaches that include restarting, redirecting, relocating, and replacing a failed component. Considering the tolerance in communication networks, we follow the classification proposed by Sterdance. So fault tolerance is the ability of a system to continue operation at a predefined level of performance, even though its components are malfunctioning, while survivability is the capability of a system to fulfill its mission in time, even in the presence of threats such as attacks or natural disasters. Disruption tolerance deals with irregular connectivity issues such as erratic channel connectivity, mobility-related issues, and power shortages. And traffic tolerance is the ability of a system to tolerate an unpredictable traffic load without a significant drop in the carried load. Traffic challenges can be legitimate, such as a flash crowd, or they can be malicious, such as from a distributed denial of service attack. We have categorized the IOHT into three levels: the sensing devices, the internet, and the computing and storage infrastructure. We have also classified the IOHT into essential services as sensing services, connectivity services, and end-to-end communication services. The services relate to the fundamental levels operating the sensing at the level of the devices, the connectivity at the level of communication between devices and gateways, and the end-to-end communication offering the communication between the devices and the computing and storage infrastructure. We have also classified the IOHT applications considering the level of criticality, meaning that the most critical and demanding applications considering communication should be prioritized. Let's take, for instance, the Ambient Assisted Living System, or AAL. They involve life-threatening situations, so we consider them critical applications. Some of the applications in AAL require low latency because of the urgency in transferring health-related warnings, for instance. Other applications require low jitter, such as remote interviews or online medical appointments. Remote supervision of vital signs is also a critical application, and it also requires low latency, but it doesn't require low jitter. We have more simple applications such as activity tracking and authorization and authentication of devices and users. So these are important applications, but they don't deal with life-threatening situations. So we don't consider them critical. They don't require low latency, but they require low jitter. We have also identified the communication resilience requirements for each essential service. So for the sensing services, for instance, it is required easiness in including or replacing the existing devices, some type of redundancy in signal collection, such as employing multiple sensors or employing multiple devices. It is required a local buffer or storage in cases of connectivity issues. And also the devices should provide some type of warning, audio or visual warning for specific circumstances, such as low battery. For the connectivity services, the requirements are, since the IOHT is a very crowded and hostile environment, the mitigation or avoidance of the cross-interference among the communication technologies is required. It is required some form of redundancy to face the connectivity issues, and it is required some type of access control to the devices in order to avoid flooding attacks or false data injection attacks. For the end-to-end communication services, it is required end-to-end security, employing multiple healthcare providers to increase the reliability, employing two-way redundant communication because the device must send data to the internet, but they also, in specific situations, must receive data from the internet, such as commands, configurations, or firmware upgrades. And we must deal with the already existing cloud and fog delays. So in order to achieve long-term communication resilience in IOHT, we advocate that the resilience disciplines, the mitigation or recovery techniques, and the tolerance disciplines must employ some level of collaboration and adaptation. Our proposal is a cross-layer resilient architecture for the IOHT communication. We call it CARICOM. And the objectives for this architecture are to increase resilience in the IOHT communication, to promote cooperation among the essential services, and to preserve communication security and performance. We have started by organizing the available works in the literature considering the proposed essential services. To develop a more precise classification, we have organized the existing works in a taxonomy considering the essential services and the resilience disciplines proposed. And here we have the available works in the literature. So let's take a closer look at this. For the sensing services and considering the dependability attribute, the works on energy efficiency focus on enhancing the availability by optimizing sensing, processing, and data transmission, while the works on fault prevention deal with the malfunctioning of the devices. Considering the security attribute, the works on cryptography involve some type of cryptographic primitive to ensure data confidentiality and privacy. Considering the connectivity services and the disruption tolerance attribute, the works on interference mitigation handle the cross-interference from multiple communications that can affect the data transfer. Considering the fault tolerance attribute, the works on communication redundancy deal with some form of communication redundancy in the communication channels in order to increase the resilience. And considering the security attribute, the works on intrusion detection employ signature or machine learning techniques to detect intrusion, while the authentication works deal with the prevention of unauthorized devices flooding or jamming the communication channels. Considering the end-to-end communication services and the disruption tolerance attribute, he works on reconfiguration, investigate the possibility to change the existing communication infrastructure in cases of failures, such as natural disasters, for instance. And the performability attribute, the works on QoS-based adaptation, deal with the adaptation of the available resources in the cases where an application fails to meet a specific quality of service level. Regarding the IOHT environment and the related works in the literature, we can observe how they provide individual solutions across the essential services. And even when the solutions emerge from the same resilience discipline, such as disruption tolerance or security, they apply only to the essential service of implementation, without any sort of collaboration among the services or the solutions. So our proposal with CareCon is an architecture that provides communication resilience considering the available information and resources, and also the coordination among these essential services. The coordination takes in account the security and the performance requirements of the IOHT applications that we have previously defined. Contemplating the CareCon architecture, the resilience module is responsible for monitoring and identifying threats and providing adaptive solutions based on the essential services requirements. It comprises 4 independent components: the monitor, the analyzer, the adapter, and the controller, that represent the architecture capabilities to prevent, mitigate, and adapt to the emerging threats. The monitor component collects data and identifies the status of individual elements, such as sensors, devices, data links, and network assets. It is also responsible for monitoring and identifying events, such as the inclusion of new devices. The analyzer component establishes a context among the events identified in the monitor component and analyzes the impacts and also the risks related to them. It comprises detection tools to identify threats, anomalies, and failures which might influence security and performance. And the adapter component provides the best response considering the requirements and the resources from each service. It also consults the evaluation from the analyzer component, the previous responses, and the available resources in order to provide an updated response. The controller component coordinates the previous components and manages the communication between the modules. The components in the resilience module need continuous updates regarding security and performance. The controller component handles these updates. Also, the resources for the essential services can change, requiring alterations that might involve the requirements management module. So the requirements management module holds security and performance approaches that are exclusive for each essential service. So for any event that might affect security, such as a policy violation, or affect performance, such as extended delays, the resilience module must consult the requirements management module, deal with the specific event, and provide the necessary updates. So the main concept considering the CareCon architecture is that it is crucial to keep the essential services working, even in the presence of failure and attacks, to only then achieve the communication resilience. So with the identification of the IOHT application, service requirements, and also the proposed architecture for CareCon, we answered our first research question. So far, we have worked in different projects that have promoted standalone contributions and also common contributions regarding CareCon. Our first contribution is a biosignal authentication and intra-body communication system for IOHT. We call it BEAT, which stands for Biosignal Enhanced Authenticator. The authentication system acts on sensing and connectivity services, and it employs security and fault tolerance resilience attributes. The contributions regarding this specific work are an overview and organization of the state-of-the-art on continuous authentication system, and also the BEAT system itself. We have started by identifying the studies employing authentication based on biological traits. We have proposed the taxonomy based on the existing works in the literature, and the works were classified according to the sensor, the type of biosignal employed, if there is any action required from the users, and what type of communication channel it was employed. By observing the state of the art, we have identified a gap in the existing works that the BEAT system seeks to fulfill. So the BEAT system employs an optical sensor, a biosignal that originates in the heart. It requires no actions from the users, and it employs a galvanic coupling intra-body communication channel, a galvanic coupling intra-body wireless communication channel. And the GC channel offers additional security than the conventional wireless communication channels, once it is less prone to attacks for being intra-body. The BEAT system collects a biosignal from the user, and with the unique attributes extracted from the biosignal, it allows or denies authentication. The three stages of BEAT comprise the signal acquisition and preprocessing, the signal transmission using the galvanic coupling communication, and the authentication process itself. The signal capture happens by using a photoplethysmogram, a PPG sensor. This type of sensor is commonly found in fitness trackers and also in smartwatches. And those sensors employ an optical emission and an optical detector that measure the blood vessels dilation. And this makes possible to identify the heart rate variation. And the captured signal is represented by a pulse wave that offers specific characteristics for each user. With the collected signal, we build a reference model that represents a user signature. And for the authentication process, we build an identifier model. And the comparison from those models grants or denies authentication. The galvanic coupling circuit in the wearable device processes the data and converts it to binary format to be transmitted through the skin. The data is filtered and the signal is amplified before and after the transmission. In the coordinator device, the signal is converted back to analog format using a comparator circuit. The experimental environment comprises the signal collection setup, where we have built the datasets employed in the authentication evaluation, and also the GC setup, where we performed the experiments regarding the data transmission through the synthetic skin. We have built two datasets comprising 30 users in two different states, sitting position and standing position. The signal processing comprises the manipulation of the PPG signal. So the first wave, the blue wave, is the original signal just collected from the device. First, we use a filter to remove the noise and the artifacts from the waveform. And then we identify the peaks to split and to overlap the individual waves for correlation. Through the identification of the correlation coefficient, we define an authentication threshold, and this specific threshold is the basis for granting or denying authentication. The last stage is the comparison among the reference model and the identifier model. So here we compare the reference model recorded for a given user and the identifier for the same user. So even though such waves are not exactly identical, they are within the established threshold, showing the existence of enough similarity to allow the user authentication. Here, we compare a reference model and the identifier model for different users. So in this specific case, the access was denied. The results from the two datasets built for this work show good accuracy in authenticating the users. So for the first dataset that comprised the users in the seated position, we achieved an accuracy of 98.66%. And in the second dataset that comprised the users in standing position, we achieved an accuracy of 92.15%. And in order to test BEAT in more severe conditions, we have also tested it using a PPG dataset from the PhysioNet database. So this specific database comprises signals from users with chronic heart-related conditions, such as arrhythmia. And in this dataset, BEAT was accurate in 89.88% of the cases. The authentication map shows that BEAT had a low false positive rate and a high true positive rate. So the development of BEAT has allowed us a sharper understanding about the cooperation between the sensing and the connectivity services. It has also assisted in a deeper understanding about the trade-offs between improving security and delivering the adequate communicate performance. And finally, it has inspired us to further evaluate the communication redundancy to increase resilience. Our second contribution is the design, implementation, and evaluation of a portable assisted living system. We call it PALS. So PALS handles multiple communication paths and acts on end-to-end communication services. And the goals are to improve network performance and mobility in the context of assisted living systems. So this contribution comprises the design of PALS, considering communication, performance, and extended mobility, and also the evaluation of multiple versions of PALS using single and multiple multipath protocols. So for the design and the deployment of PALS, we consider ambient assisted living, AAL, as an application, multi-home devices that are devices capable of using different communication interfaces simultaneously, fixed and cellular communication technologies, and single and multipath and also TCP and UDP-based communication protocols. So PALS is a multi-layered system. And at the sensing layer, AAL employs static and mobile sensors to monitor the users. And one of the problems with the existing AAL systems is that they limit the user mobility to indoor environments, such as houses or apartments. So by employing a dual home device in the gateway layer, we grant simultaneous access to multiple communication technologies and allow users to benefit from an extended communication area. And with multiple communication technologies, we can employ different configurations, such as using both communication technologies and paths simultaneously to gain in performance, or we can use the handover among the paths when one of them is unavailable. And the final goal is to reach the remote infrastructure. The multipath protocols provide different configurations regarding communication technologies. The experiments we have conducted seek to reproduce those different scenarios. So in the first situation, the user has access to both communication technologies, and the data is being transmitted from the coordinator in the gateway layer to the remote infrastructure in the remote applications layer. What happens is, since both communication technologies are available, the PALS coordinator can benefit from them simultaneously by means of the MPTCP or the MP-QUIC protocols. The second situation happens when the user moves away from the Wi-Fi access point, and how the multipath protocols behave with the handover between the communication technologies. To evaluate the performance and the handover of PALs using different protocols, we have conducted an emulation-based experiment in multiple scenarios considering the following experimental environment. We used an Ubuntu OS patched with MPTCP. It's very important to notice that the Ubuntu OS doesn't come natively with the MPTCP protocol installed. So we have to perform extensive changes at the kernel level to install the MPTCP protocol. We used the Mininet emulation platform, the network emulator NetEm, the iPerf2 to generate additional traffic and simulate path competition, and we used the multipath quick project implementation that relies on the Go open source programming language. The evaluation scenario consists of two multi-home devices communicating using disjointed paths. And this represents the client-server connection from a smartphone to a remote server using different communication technologies. The evaluation in randomized scenarios comprised 2,000 emulations from 50 different scenarios, and the values were randomly picked from the experimental parameters table. We performed two types of emulation, without and with the insertion of losses, or packet loss. We performed 10 repetitions for each scenario, and we employed 4 protocols, the single path TCP and QUIC, and the multipath MPTCP and MP-QUIC. And the objective for this experiment was to observe the behavior of the multipath and the single path protocols in a wide range of possibilities. These are the results for the experiments without the insertion of loss. The graph on the left indicates the ratio of the delay in transferring the workload using TCP divided by QUIC and MPTCP divided by MP-QUIC. So the idea is that if the protocols had exactly the same performance, the values should be always 1. So any values below 1 indicate better performance for TCP or MPTCP, while the values above 1 indicate a better performance for QUIC and MP-QUIC. So the results indicate that in general, the single path protocols have comparable performance among themselves, and also that the PALS with MP-QUIC was faster than PALS with MPTCP in all emulations. The box plots show that the single path protocols are similar, and for the multipath protocols, the PALS with MP-QUIC was faster in transferring the workload than PALS MPTCP. The addition of losses causes less harm to the UDP-based version of PALS, and specifically the PALS MP-QUIC version. The ratio, considering the protocols, indicates better performance for PALS versions with UDP protocols, the QUIC and MP-QUIC versions of PALS. The box plots results indicate that, once again, PALS MP-QUIC was the fastest, and that PALS MPTCP and PALS QUIC results were quite comparable in the lossy environments. The handover evaluation considered only the multipath protocols, because we need 2 paths to perform the handover. We have used the same scenarios, except that one of the paths was disabled 15 seconds after the beginning of the emulation. and this represents a communication failure in one of the paths. The results show that both MPTCP and MPQuick are efficient in performing the handover between the paths, with MPTCP being faster in about 30% of the emulations and MPQuick being faster in 70% of the emulations. Also, Pulse MPQuick needs less transmissions while transferring the workload, which can benefit energy efficiency in the portable gateway. Considering the results for the randomized scenarios, Pulse MPQuick implementation was the best. It provided better use of bandwidth in all the cases. Pulse MPTCP had a significant decreased performance with the insertion of losses in the experiments, and those results put Pulse MPTCP very close to the single path protocols, mainly the Pulse Quick protocol. And this inspired us to perform further evaluations considering more realistic approaches. So we have made additional experiments in order to evaluate the protocols under specific conditions. The additional evaluations regarding the specific scenarios rely on real data and 4 regions across the globe. So for each region, we have a best case scenario and a worst case scenario, and they are based on the download and upload speeds for fixed and cellular broadband. So these values rely on the speedtest.net reports from 2019 that comprise over 500 million individual evaluations. We performed 50 repetitions for these scenarios for 100 emulations total. We inserted delay of 24 milliseconds and inserted also data loss ratio of 5% that represent the global average. So the first conclusion, considering the results, is that the performance of the multipath protocols highly depend on the network characteristics. So the Pulse Quick single path implementation presented the better performance than the multipath Pulse MPTCP version in all emulations and for every scenario. Pulse MPQuick performance was comparable to the Pulse Quick performance, and the results were also very similar across the region and scenarios. The results for Europe are quite similar to the global results, with the UDP-based protocols being faster than the TCP-based versions of Pulse. In the United States of America scenarios, Pulse and PTCP had the best performance of the regional tests. However, it still lags behind the UDP-based versions. The South America scenarios presented the lowest bandwidth values of all regional emulations, and we have noticed that the TCP-based protocols have performance issues with lower bandwidth values. The UDP-based protocols performed better than the TCP-based protocols in the specific scenarios. One of the reasons for that is the simpler handshake approach for the Quick and the MPQuick. And considering only the multipath implementations, Pulse and PTCP performed worse than Pulse and MPQuick. And maybe this can be related. We will perform additional tests, but this might be related to the more complex path choices implementations in MPTCP. So what happens is that most times it's faster to use any available path than having to wait for the path choice algorithm to estimate the best path. So this is also one of the reasons why multipath protocols show almost no benefits in smaller files transfer. And considering the objective that was to enhance performance and also to increase mobility, the best evaluated version was Pulse MPQuick that offered good performance and has multipath capabilities. For the Pulse evaluation, we have considered multiple network performance metrics. They are availability, loss, delay, and utilization. So far, our experiment explored the functionality of the system, the impacts of the packet loss and also the latency as performance metrics. We will further evaluate PELs using active monitoring and considering the connectivity aspects regarding mobility, the packet retransmissions in all the scenarios, and also the delay variation. We will also evaluate the bandwidth and throughput by means of passive monitoring through the packet capture analysis. Well, so far, we have identified that PELs provides low delay in transferring health-related data, especially when we use the UDP-based protocols. However, we also want to understand the eventual side effects of employing such protocols. So overhead due to the multiplexing and the replication of the packets in communication paths during the handshake, and also security-related issues are possible side effects. Our consideration about the solutions employing multipath protocols are that using multipath protocols should be studied on a per-case basis, since not all applications can benefit from multipath protocols, and the easiness in implementation and protocol availability should be considered. For instance, MPTCP requires complex changes at OS kernel level, while the MPQuick protocol can be deployed in user space. PAL's development has brought important insights regarding the development of CareCon. It has allowed a better understanding of the end-to-end services regarding the network performance. It has allowed us to evaluate mobility limitations considering some of the technologies and to have some ideas to how to bypass them. And it has allowed us to consider using communication redundancy for portable solutions. So next I'll present my final considerations. I have presented my work on cross-layer adaptive resilience architecture for the Internet of Health Things communication. I started with the context and the definition of the problem. Next, I presented my thesis and the goals for this work. Then I presented our proposal for CareCon, a cross-layer resilient architecture for the IOHT communication, and also the works we have done so far, BEAT and PELS, and how they relate to each other. The design and the evaluation of BEAT and also PELS has allowed us to contemplate possible solutions considering communication resilience, security, and services collaboration. So a possible future solution for redundancy and cooperation among the services considers employing a portable device with multiple functions that acts as a coordinator for the sensing services and a gateway for the connectivity services. By employing multiple communication paths, it is possible to deploy performance and redundancy modes of communication with the internet, promoting performance gains and also increasing communication resilience. With the information gathered from the communication paths, such as delay and throughput, it is possible to make a decision for the devices in the sensing services and also to increase resilience. A possible example is changing the sensing rate or even disabling a sensor that collects data in the sensing services, relying on the information provided by the gateway that is acting in the connectivity services. Thus, we increase the collaboration among the essential services. Considering the second research question, we have designed a possible solution, CareCon, and we are currently deploying the solution. Our contribution so far allowed the publication of a conference paper and a journal article. Both were completed when I was part of the Health Sense project, which is a cooperative project among the Northeastern University in the United States of America and the Federal Universities of Paraná and Pará in Brazil. The classification and the organization of the essential services and the communication requirements for IOHT that I have just presented allowed us to write a journal article, which is currently under review. And finally, cooperation involving a master's student from the National Higher School of Electrical Engineering, Electronics, Information Technology, Hydraulics and Telecommunications in France, and a master's graduated student from NR2 lab in Brazil, resulted in the submission of a conference paper. It has been submitted 2 weeks ago, so we are still waiting for the results. But aside from the submission, this interaction with those students allowed a massive learning for me about the importance of offering guidance to the younger students. This is the timetable regarding my past activities and the upcoming activities. And my thesis defense must happen before June 2022. This is the end of my presentation. I make myself available for comments and questions.
Thank you, Fernando. So now we go for the questions of the jury committee. I would like to invite and thank Professor Burak Kantarsi. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michelle. It's a great pleasure always. Fernando, thank you very much for the detailed presentation. I really enjoyed it, and also I went through your draft that you provided to me before the presentation. I also enjoyed it as well, but my role is asking questions here and providing some insights. So, okay, don't take anything personal here for the questions and comments. Okay, I'm just doing my job. The first thing is about the, let's talk about the terms. Adaptive resilience. You talk about resilience a lot of times in your proposal. And also you mentioned resilience a number of times in your presentation as well. And you also presented us a very good figure actually for the components that contribute to the resilience. And as I saw that under dependability, we had the availability and reliability as well. Now, I'm wondering, how are you incorporating, or are you considering to incorporate the mathematical models or foundations for availability or reliability? Because when you're saying you're doing something for resilience, it needs to be proved actually through, or it needs to be built on some mathematical grounds from the standpoint of availability and or reliability. So do you have any plans for that, or are you planning to make some assumptions there? If you are making those assumptions, maybe you'd like to share those with us.
Yes, Professor. That is one of my main concerns, because I understand that to actually prove the availability, I should perform some type of uptime experiments considering a real scenario. So that is something that we have not yet discussed. I mean, when I say me, we, me and my advisor, but that's I'd say that is one of my, if not the main concern I have. How can I prove it? How will we prove it? And we even imagine that we might implement and try to implement something to experiment on a real case in a real base scenario. But I understand that takes a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. And again, also following up on that, regarding connectivity or resilience, connectivity redundancy, you also talk about this as well. That is also to ensure resilience as well. And it comes with, of course, nothing is free. It comes at the expense of additional resource usage. So besides a mathematical model that builds on outage probability, I also encourage you to look into these trade-offs as well, and also, if possible, making an optimization for that trade-off, like resource usage or resource overhead versus resiliency. So what is the optimum point? If I use all the resources that I can dedicate for the connection to ensure resiliency, of course, I'll be providing the best service ever, but it's not going to be sustainable. So what should be the best point where I can make this trade-off for resilient connectivity? So in addition to the availability or reliability formulation for your resilience analytical model, I think another direction that you may want to look into is the trade-off between connectivity and resilience. That's what I can see. Do you have any also plans for that?
That's something that we also must discuss, and we can see a clear, as a matter of fact, two clear trade-offs that are the connectivity and the redundancy, but also what we have worked so far, the maybe even more clear trade-off between the security we implement with the time it takes to transfer the urgent signals. So those two trade-offs are something that we really want to dedicate to at the next stage.
Yeah, exactly. And also possible disruptions. When you talk about resilience, possible disruptions, the arrival profile or arrival characteristics of those disruptions, that will also affect your model as well. So are you going to consider a single point of disruption, or are you going to consider, because you're actually proposing here a system, a holistic solution that has three pillars, as far as I can see. I'll also talk about that as well in the next few minutes. But when you work on a system like this, you may also ask questions to yourself, these kind of questions to yourself, like, are you going to consider just a single point of disruption here, or multi-points of disruptions, service disruptions, and what would be the characteristics for the arrival patterns of those disruptions? And based on the answers you give to those assumptions, you'll be able to form a model, a better model, and then a better analysis for your resiliency. So that's my 2 cents for that part. And considering the security part, you talked a lot about intrusion detection. I also saw in your slides as well, and also in the draft, you talk about intrusion detection too. But I'd like to hear a little bit more about what sort of intrusions are we talking about here. So what sort of threats are you considering here? Because security is one of the several aspects that you would like to address in your thesis, right? And when we talk about a security solution, which is a part of resilience, I do appreciate that you showed that as a part of the resiliency. When you talk about security contribution to the resilience of a system, we should also accompany that with a credible threat model. So I did not see a detailed credible threat model in your proposal. So you may want to elaborate on that, and you may like to revisit that part. I don't know what you think about it. It doesn't mean that security is not an important. No, security is an important component here. It's really crucially important, critical. But you need to build your solution on credible threat models when you talk about a solution that you're proposing for security. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, Professor. My vision, my main vision is that the security threats, they must be considered on a per essential service level. So we will probably build 3 different models, for each of the levels of the services we have identified. So of course they are pretty different considering each service, because if we talk about the sensing services, we are talking about devices, and there is a minimum, if it exists a chance that it's a minimum chance of intrusion detection of a device, especially a portable and personal device. So of course we understand that the security at this level, it should be lowered when compared, of course, to the more broader aspects of the communication.
Mm-hmm. And also, you talk about the device level security. We are talking about a cyber physical system here. So it has cyber aspects and also a physical dimension here. So especially when you talk about Internet of Health things, which actually builds on sensors in general, right? You should also keep in mind that this is a cyber physical system. So there are not only cyber threats that would translate into security issues for the system, but there are also physical threats that may translate into security issues of the system as well, like tampering, for instance. Is your system tamper-proof, for example? Maybe your beat framework in the, I think it was the 4th chapter of your proposal, as far as I remember. So your beat framework may also have a component, I will also talk about that one as well in a few minutes, that may also consider addressing that tamper-proofness issues, because having a system at the sensor level tamper-proof is not only for the security of the system, but it also has other implications. It may have other implications, like if you have, let's say, pre-existing condition. This is actually mainly for health monitoring purposes. We're using them for health monitoring purposes. So if you have a pre-existing condition, well, that way it may translate into other implications from the, let's say, even healthcare insurance system as well. If we talk about, tampering in that, tampering with the sensors. So not only security and privacy implications, but it will have other impacts as well. So that's why considering the physical issues here as a part of the problem may be a possibility, or if you're not considering a thorough justification of not considering them here, okay, a thorough justification of excluding them here would be actually a good thing to do in your thesis. So how much time do I have, by the way, Michelle? I don't know. I didn't ask, but
There is no.
So I take the liberty to continue then. All right.
There is no time limit, Professor.
Okay, excellent. Now, if you can go to your slide 21, I was taking some notes here about, again, the security issue. Okay, for the mitigation or recovery here, parameterization. So you have two. This is about resiliency. Sorry, I said security. You have two approaches here for parameterization. One of them is the optimization. The other one is a rule-based approach. Now, I was actually here a little bit surprised. Are you considering, by the way, parameterization in your future steps for recovery?
Yeah, I don't know if in an implementation level, mainly as a concept.
Okay. All right, then I will continue with my next question here. Okay. You presented I think it was also in slide 24 as well. There was an application requirement here. So for criticality, I understand activity tracking not being critical, but I'm actually surprised to see that authorization or authentication are being marked as not critical. So why is that so?
Okay, that is interesting because it was one of the questions, one of the question raised by this specific classification comes from an article we just wrote, and was the exact same doubt of one of the revisers. So what we tried to achieve was that the authorization and authentication, even though they are very important, considering other instances, they are not really critical for life-threatening situations. So that was what we tried to achieve. But if I revisit your previous comment, I understand that it is a life-threatening situation because if the user has a precondition of a heart-related condition, for instance, and he loses the devices or other person tamper with the device, it might become a life-threatening situation. So I understand your point of view, but our idea was that the authorization and authentication were not critical because they don't represent a life-threatening situation.
I see. Okay. All right. And for your objectives, I think you were also listing them in the 27th slide also here.
Okay.
Okay. Now, for first objective, we have talked about the resiliency now in the Internet of Health Things communications. For promotion of cooperation among essential services, I'm still a little bit not clear about what you're addressing here to improve or to promote cooperativeness from the standpoint of actually performance metrics. Can you tell me what are you trying to improve here? I understand promoting cooperation among essential services as an objective, but when you present, if you're selling this to someone, how are you going to quantify your your results. So that's something I'm still not clear about. I understand intuitively this will be actually, of course, useful. But again, as a scientist and an engineer, I always talk in terms of metrics and quantitative terms. So that's why for this part, I'm still a little bit unclear. What is your selling point here?
Okay, so my idea is that we can acquire different information from the essential services, but the information we get, it is only applied by the solutions in the specific essential service. And what we are trying to achieve is that we can use the information from a different service level to enhance the services in the previous service level, because I understand that these services are tightly bonded with each other. So one example, if I may, one of the ideas I have is represented in here. So one of the examples is using the information in the connectivity services. So in the connectivity services at this side, I can get some information, some useful information from the channel characteristics and information such as bandwidth and delay. And for my understanding, the devices that are on the sensing services, they can make a better use of the resources that are the communication channels by offering, for instance, less data. Also, we have three sensors in the device, and they capture a continuous amount of information. So this is represented by an amount of information. And whenever I have a jammed or congested channel in the connectivity services, I can send less data to the through the communication channels in order to avoid jamming or overloading the communication channels. So that's one of my ideas.
Okay.
I don't know if I was clear, Professor. Please.
No. It's actually it's more clear. I know the question can also be answered in multiple ways, but I'm now.
Let me just maybe clarify what I understood for your question. I had understood as how he will quantify if he got or he reached that goal or not, right?
Sorry, Michelle, I couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. So what I got from your question was more like how he could quantify if he reached or not that goal that he presented, right?
Yes, exactly.
That was what I understood. So in that sense, Fernando, he wants to know how you will know if you achieve that goal or not. It's more in that sense, and not exactly the scenario that you will use to evaluate.
So how are you going to verify this? Yeah.
So let me just go back to the. I don't recall the question anymore. So, can you repeat your question, Professor?
So you are claiming that you are promoting cooperation among essential services here.
Okay.
Now, question is, how are you going to verify that?
Okay.
You achieve this from a quantitative standpoint. So that's important. So doing things is one thing, but verifying the things that you have done is another thing, and that's what the
difficult
thesis.
part.
Exactly.
I understand. So I guess what can resemble the most what you are asking are the experiments we have performed with PELs, with the multipath communication and the single path communication. And from that, we extract a lot of information. But sorry, Professor. There is some static. I don't know if you can listen.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. I'm listening to some static.
Okay.
So what we resemble the most, what you have just asked, is our experiments with PELs, where we evaluated some performance metrics. So I don't have the exact idea on how those data and how that information can help me with the cooperation among the essential services right now. And I'm pretty sure we have to quantify that information.
You actually now raised a good point, because we are getting there. My next question was going to be, how are you planning to acquire data to verify this at the end of the thesis, or at the end of that part of your thesis? Now, yeah, okay, all right. Well, we can revisit this down the road. That's fine, because it's not easy to answer right away. Okay, so in your yes,
sir, those considerations you are making, they are also in the manuscript. So
yes,
I'll have access to them, because I find them really interesting. So, and I'm not being able to note everything. So
yeah, sure, absolutely. Okay, can you go to your slide 34 here?
Okay.
So the requirements management module, I saw that actually before as well, but I'd like to understand here a little bit more about the requirement management module here, because even the requirements management module, design of the requirements management module is it's actually a very solid contribution. So what is your plan for designing this management module? Because there are lots of things to consider here, like under security, for instance. You're listing security policies, rules, intrusion detection, and access control. So even those parts, not even mentioning the performance at all, just even the security itself under the requirements management module can lead to tons of research problems. So I'd like to hear specifications about the requirements management module here, because I don't think you are able to solve all the problems under security, or all the problems under performance issues here, like including interference control, latency limit, or interoperability, or mobility management. Well, all of these titles, they are standalone research topics. So can you elaborate on this a little bit, and convince me that this is going to be a well-defined contribution here that addresses these components.
I will sure try, Professor.
Yeah.
So let me just explain that the manuscript version that I provided for you and also for Professor Audrey, it was an early stage development document.
Yep.
And at the beginning of my PhD, this idea, or at least at the beginning of this specific work, the main idea was to take care of all the resilience aspects, not only the communication resilience aspects. So I have discussed this with Dr. Nogueira, and she told me, well, you are trying to embrace the war, and you really can't do that. So, of course, this represents an early stage of that point of view, and for sure, we will have to narrow down some of the specification. So, what occurs is that in this specific version of the architecture, I haven't even splitted the security aspects between these services, so they are all mixed up together. But my idea is to select some of those security requirements and the ones that relate the most to the communication resilience, and try to understand how we can somehow adapt them to our scenario, our specific scenario. And I understand that for some of the specific tools and solutions, for instance, IDS, as you mentioned, I can have an application for the sensing service, and I can have a different application of the same category, IDS, for the communication services, and I can have a different IDS for the end-to-end communication service. So that is very complex, and we have to narrow down and to really understand the main aspects, both not only for the security, but also for the performance requirements. Because when I really started to research to perform the additional works that would contribute to the CareCon architecture. So right now I understand that the interference control between the existing communication technologies, it's very complex, very, very complex, and there is no silver bullet. You can't really say this, by doing this, I will achieve the perfect solution. So rest assured that we will go back to this, and we will revisit this specific component. I guess considering the components, the overview of the components, we have a pretty good view of what we want each component to perform, the task that each component has to perform. But for the requirements, I guess I was a little too bold.
Okay. I see. Yeah. But I'm glad to hear that you are also aware of this issue here. Okay. For your BEAT proposal, can you go to your slide 39? Because you were, I think, summarizing something there, because I also took notes there as well. Yeah. So, okay, this is biosignal-based continuous authentication, what you're planning to do here. But the data that you're collecting here, what can you say about the veracity of the data? Because as far as I remember, you had 30 users in the previous or recent work that you implemented here, right?
Yes.
So you collected data from 30 users. What can you say about the veracity of the data that you collected from those users? So that's my first question. And the second question is, what can you say about the demographics of your users, of your participants? Because that affects, for sure, the performance of your authentication scheme here.
Yes, Professor. We haven't really selected specific users. We did the collection of the biosignals with the users. We were able to manage. So most of them were teachers and students, and so we did the data set we built was with the people from our lab. And we really didn't establish any age condition, or so it was really an open experiment.
Yeah.
And it was conducted in a very restricted environment, so it was a controlled environment. And for sure, I know that if we had performed the experiment or the collection of the data, considering different possibilities and scenarios, for instance, with the users running or walking, and in different situations, the outcome could be pretty different. So that's one of the issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I also understand that maybe the sensor we use, the PPG sensor, might not be the only alternative, because it is considering the health related conditions. The PPG is not the best sensor. We have better sensors for that. But for our case, which was the authentication, and in this specific topic, disregarding the health related conditions, so we didn't want to identify any health problems or anything like that. I guess it was a valid experiment. So that's the main idea. The second data set with the users in standing position already shows a decrease in accuracy. So we understand that merely the user being merely in different positions highly affect the outcome of the results. And that is shown in the third database we use it, with the database being provided by the users with health-related conditions, arrhythmia, and so we have an even lower score of accuracy. So we understand
that was. Sorry to interrupt you. Please go ahead, Fernando.
It is a real issue and a big problem, but we also understand that the biosignal doesn't require exactly to be the PPG sensor, the photoplethysmogram. Maybe we can use an ECG, but of course the collection of the data is more complex, and so that's something we also have to worry about.
That was going to be my next question, actually. Your performance results for authentication. If you can go to your slide number 48. Okay, so here in your second data set, I see a sort of sharp decrease in accuracy.
Yes.
And there's also a sharp increase in the number of false positives here. So 50 out of 76 interactions. So you have false positives. So what is the reason for this? Because this is actually, okay, it's not maybe tampered. It's more than 5%, first of all, as far as I can see here. Am I wrong?
No.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. So, what is the reason for the for this high false positive rate here? Did you get into this a little bit in more detail?
Considering the biosignal, we employ the PPG. The main issue we have is that collecting the PPG it's very complicated. It's highly difficult because it's sensitive to lighting conditions and movements of the user. So a slight movement of the user can highly affect the pulse wave. So that is the main issue we had. So I really believe that with a different biosignal, maybe the authentication accuracy could be more linear considering any data set. But that there's something we also should mention is that the other signals are more difficult to acquire. So so there is a clear trade-off right there because the PPG biosignal it's very easy to acquire, but it is not as good as the other biosignals. So that is the main point.
Okay. All right. Because it's really strange actually having that many false positives here. Should be something that can be addressed by some means, but you may want to revisit it later. I understand. I hear what you're saying, but this can be maybe considered. So, do you have any plans for this to improve this accuracy or to cope with the false positive decisions here?
I I have to be very very honest with you, Professor. I don't know if we will have the time to go back to this specific experiment.
Okay.
So, but I would really like to. It was the work that we performed that I enjoyed the most to perform. But we really have our hands very full right now, and I don't know if I'll have the time to go back. Just let me say another thing. It's very hard to 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 buy good aftermarket PPG sensors. It would be probably very different if we had access to some aftermarket device like an Apple Watch, for instance. But we don't have access to the raw data from the a smartwatch like and I mean, so it's very hard for us to get quality sensors, and this probably affects very much the results.
I would like just to add something, Fernando. In fact, I think your answer to Burke should be more concerned if this point is important to prove your thesis or not. Because if it's really important to address this issue, you should come back. And the matter of time is a question of priority in this case. So I think your answer should go more in that direction to decide if you need to come back or not. I don't know if you understand me.
Yes, I understand, Professor. Yes, I should consider that it is really not the biggest concern right now.
Okay.
In addition to what I just said, it is not our primary concern right now, because I guess also what we learned from this specific work was more in the line of the trade-off of implementing higher levels of security and how in the amount of time that would affect further down the line. So if I have to authenticate, to have an authenticated communication channel by means of bits, and I was transferring, I had to transfer a critical warning, for instance, that would take a long time, and I don't really see that happening right now. So if we had to go back to this work, I guess the main issue would be to keep the authentication time in a lower amount of time. So to authenticate as fast as possible and not really considering the accuracy or so. What we have understood is that the authentication and the really complex authentication methods, they consume time. And maybe so for some of the applications we deal with very critical applications, maybe we don't have that time.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I have two more questions actually, especially regarding your PALS scheme. About your performance evaluation settings, if you can go to your slide number 58.
58. Okay.
Yeah. So for your experimental parameters here, what is your assumption? What are your assumptions here? And what is your justification to adopt your experimental settings here? Because you present a number of experimental settings, but yeah, we may need some justification here why you choose these settings, and if you're planning to do anything else.
Yes. So in the presentation, I don't have the reference, but I'm pretty sure I I have it on the manuscript. So these experimental parameters are extracted from an article, and they represent the health-related science and environments. So we have shaped our experiment considering the health-related parameters of capacity, end-to-end, and if there is a loss in the communication channel, or with or without the addition of loss. And the only thing we really haven't been able to consider was about the workload, because what I want to simulate, what we will simulate in further scenarios, are the continuous transferring of health-related data. So let's assume I'm capturing some form of biosignal, and I will continuously transfer that through the communication channels. So I'll have a continuous workload instead of a static workload. So we employed a workload of 20 megabytes just in order to finish. It was the intermediate file size to complete the emulations. So.
Okay. I was also going to ask about the workload as well, but it's good that you pointed it out. Maybe one last question.
Okay.
Before I wrap up, about mobility management. That is one of your future directions, as far as I understand. So could you please elaborate on that? What specific problems in mobility management are you planning to address here?
Well, that's a tough question, Professor, because one of the bases that we are trying to work with is one of your previous questions was the redundancy, and one of the forms, one of the ways to increase resilience as far as I'm concerned, is to promote some forms or some type of redundancy, and that is very hard to achieve considering our specific scenario. And when we go to mobile applications, because you kind of lose that resilience aspect. So with PELS, we built in a specific scenario where you have access to two different communication technologies at the same time, and you can go back and forth with those communication technologies. But I'm really not sure how we can really explore this when we consider only the cellular communication, for instance. So I guess the resilience in that case, it wouldn't be related to the gateway itself. It would be more in the scope of the telecommunication, or I mean, it's a little bit outside of my scope. But I really don't want it to be outside of my scope. I really want to bring something so that I can improve my collaboration. So that is something that we have also to work on.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Fernando. I asked all of my questions, so I don't have any more questions. Michelle, I'm going to mute myself for the moment.
Thank you so much, Burak.
My pleasure.
Yeah, for sure, Fernando will need to think about all your comments. I think he have observed that he has so much work to do, and he will need to decide about the priorities in that sense. So now I will ask Professor Audrey to make his considerations. Professor Audrey, thank you so much for your contribution on the work.
Everybody, thank you for the invitation, Michelle and Fernando. It's a pleasure to be here with Burke in order to discuss about the qualification of Fernando. I like so much the resilience area. That's not so good for Fernando, but it's good for everyone here. Okay. I will start with I have so many questions, and I said I will start with your title, because you have a thesis, you're considering a thesis, and one of the things that I see your title is the use of the word architecture. Why you think the architecture is so important for you in this case, or is relevant or not, the architecture, or your thesis or your hypothesis in this case is developed of resilience with adaptive consideration, or not necessarily the use or development of the architecture? Why did you decide to use the architecture in your title?
I guess that mainly, Professor, is because we begin the work with the design of the architecture. So, at least in my point of view, it was a more logical approach for that. So, since we begin the work with the design and the considerations about the architecture, I assumed that it would be fair to use it in the title.
Because if you consider architecture, you need to prove us and offer us an architecture, complete architecture, or in this case, maybe you have trouble considering that you offer architecture. I'll talk to you more about that in next slide when I talk to you again about the use of the architecture. Okay? Because if you look at your title, you have architecture is a point, resilience another point. You need to discuss about that. Adaptive, a characteristic that to add to resilience also, and you have cross layer, more 1 point. All of this for IoT. In this case, a specific IoT that use of Internet of Health health things. Is, in my opinion, it's a lot of things together.
Okay.
Okay, and that's the point. You said when Burke asked you about everything, you said one word that I was asking about is a provocative questions about maybe sometimes in that moment looks like, but you have a silver bullet. You consider that it's possible to solve any or all problems in your thesis. Maybe not. Maybe you're considering, I believe I want to offer a discussion about resilience and adaptive situation, not necessary to provide a complete architecture. It's on one of my points for you, okay?
Okay.
What is this? When I saw you, and we have a lot of slides at the beginning, you told about motivation, sensing, communication, etc. But if I remember only to see the word resilience, that the point of your thesis here, only in slide 18. Could you put the slide 18, please?
Okay, Professor. Slide 18.
18, yes. In that moment, I believe, I don't remember the previous slide, you talk about resilience. Do you have resilience, discussion about resilience, IoT, cyber physical systems, cyber human systems in the previous slide?
I believe not, Professor.
That's the point. When you see you have a title, your hypothesis, your discussion about resilience, but you offer motivation for the audience, for your research, but only in this moment you talk about resilience. And we talk about resilience considering a diagram, and you try to offer for us the definition of resilience considering LAPRI. And I see, when I see the development of your work, I don't see resilience in that point about your work in general. Why is resilience so important for you? You don't told me, or for each one in the previous slides, why you need resilience. Could you clarify or answer this question for us in that moment? Why it's important resilience in considering your scenario, your scope?
Well, Professor, because I agree. Initially, I agree with you. Maybe I should have provided the concept of resilience in the earlier slides. And of course, resilience is the basis for this work, because what we are trying to achieve is the persistence of the services delivery. That is what we are trying to achieve with our work, and resilience is the basis for that. So I agree with you that it should be exploited a little sooner.
Yes, but resilience is important for your scenario. Why?
I'm not following the question, Professor.
You're considering your scenarios provide sensing, connectivity, communication better. That's right?
That's right.
When you say that, why resilience is so important to offer? Why it's important to offer a resilience solution, resilient system for this motivation, for your motivation?
Well, because we are dealing with health-related conditions, so they are very important applications and signals and data all for all. And without resilience, those type of systems and applications are highly harmed. And
good. Go ahead. We have more motivation or more claims about that?
No, I guess that's the main idea.
Okay, I agree with you. Okay, you need resilience because you said a lot of issues. Why you need adaptive resilience?
I need adaptive resilience
because this is a different resilience. It's a resilience we have the character to be adaptive. That's right.
I assume that is one characteristic of resilience, adaptive resilience. So we need adaptive resilience because the environments in IOHT are constantly changing, and they might be changing due to threats, for instance, considering the security aspects, but they might also be affected by flaws or communication, connectivity issues, which are not related to security. So that's the main idea for that.
Okay, and you need about cross-layer because you're considering sensory, communication, etc., etc. That's right?
That's it. We have defined 3 different services, essential services layers, and we need the adaptation throughout these essential services.
Okay, but when I see your slides or your manuscript, I don't see this way. I know you know, but it's not your motivation this way. Your motivation in general at the beginning was considering more performance, or you need to define what you want about the safety or security in this case. Is a continuous service or not? You need to define about this. I believe it's important because it's not so clear for each all, for us. And one point, when considering intrusion or threat, that's important for you. Burke told about what you're considering intrusion or threat. In this case, in my point, when I read your manuscript, when I see your presentation, you're considering more performance in that moment. So we need to consider that you offer trade-off about performance and security, or your security safety, not security like threats or intrusion. That I believe you need to consider your assumptions or your manuscript in this way, because in my opinion, that moment your work is open, is a generic. But I know you, and I know you have this idea in your mind. But in this case, there are a lot of ideas, open ideas in your mind. You need to think about those ideas together. You need to redefine your scope, because maybe you have a lot of ideas, but you need to think about what you need this moment. What are your idea about your thesis, not open issue that you think maybe for future works. Because in my opinion, you have many overlap about different ideas together. That's a problem in your presentation. There's a problem in your manuscript.
Okay.
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 Let me see about slide 8. Your start slide 8.
8.
8, 9, 10. 8.
8, 9, 10.
8,
Okay.
8, 9, 10. You start.
Okay.
8. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. In that moment, you say, complex environment is a problem for you. My question for you is, in fact, is a problem or is a challenger? And the same idea about the slide, the next slide, 9 and 10. Because I believe in your scenario, you have so many challenges that you need to consider it to solve this challenge in terms of the problem. Is a problem, or those are challenges that you need to solve?
Oh, I guess they are more like, I understand what you're saying, Professor. I guess they are more like characteristics of the IOHT environment. And so they are not really problems. So they're something that I have to overcome. Okay, I agree with you. So maybe using the word problem is not
not
really
clear. I believe after that you could you say challenge or properties or have a characteristic or features, and because of those characteristics you have this problem.
Okay.
You be the next question, and what is your problem? Could you define in one sentence what is your problem?
Yeah, I guess right now, considering the open scope you have just commented on, I have lots of problems. So,
what a problem you need to work?
Well, I'd say that the main problem is that this environment with all these challenges are very difficult to tackle all of these challenges. So this is the main problem considering the IOHT environment, at least from my perspective.
It's not a problem you have or many problems, but you need to consider, maybe you put there like when you said here's an opportunity, open issues, etc. But you need to focus your problem, in this case, your research problem, because it's not clear, it's open.
Okay.
Let's see what is the research problem. It's slide 12.
12.
Yes. When in that moment, what do you think about your thesis? Is correct for you or need to adapt or need to make adjust that moment? After so many discussions that you have about Professor Burke, like with me in that moment.
Well, Professor, I guess I could maybe adapt, considering the problem we have with the adaptive. So maybe I guess the adaptive part of the thesis, the idea for the thesis, and also I agree that this thesis as it is right now, it really focus on the network performance and less on the other characteristics I would like to achieve. Mm-hmm. So yes, I'll probably make some small changes or redesign this idea for thesis.
One interesting point in this thesis, they use the verb to achieve. How is possible to prove to achieve? It's very difficult to say about that. Let me see the order. I believe is when we have three research. An interesting point here. We have a main research question in this manuscript. I don't know if you have, yes, but you have your main research question in the next slides is different about when you have it here. Because here you said how to achieve adaptive communication resilience while maintaining minimal network performance. I don't know what is minimal network performance in a multi-layer and dynamic environment such as IOHT. It's such as IOHT is open again because for you the idea is to apply in IOHT, not such as, but specifically in this kind of network. That's right?
Okay, that's right. Professor, I'm sorry for the changes in the presentation.
No problem. That's no problem.
Just let me explain that after we have to send the document, the manuscript, 30 days before for the university, we have to send it 30 days prior to the defense. Mm-hmm. So what happens is that we are really working in at least two very specific parts of the the works we are conducting right now, and they reflect the thesis document. So probably a big part of the manuscript has already been changed, because this version you have in your hands don't consider many of the discussions I had with Dr. Nogueira, and we have improved the document, and we have corrected some of the parts, such as the research question, as you have noticed, and that's the only reason the document is different. So
don't worry, in that moment your qualification, not the final thesis.
Okay. But just to explain.
Oh, I understand. In terms of the second question, research questions, you underline here is communication security. I believe you need to consider what is security. Is that security safety? If you're safety, okay, good. Considering communication safety, not security. Because if you consider security, you need to talk about intrusion, threats, and it's not the DOS or whatever that you need to consider. For me, security is so dangerous. This word is so dangerous for you, considering your proposed architecture, considering beat, whatever. Okay. Let me see more. Okay, I believe when I read your chapter 2 about background, I ask why Fernando wrote so much about resilience and put so many slides here if I don't see so many assumptions in your architecture. I believe you need to consider to improve or think about adjust in your chapter 2, because, for example, one important point for me is techniques for resilient IOHT. But in these cases, is a subsection in your manuscript. One important point for you that your techniques of resilient for IOHT is so for me is a separate session only, and you discuss techniques for your scenarios, resilience, considering safety, resilience, whatever you want to discuss about only your IoT, specific IoT, in this case, healthcare. Okay. And for me, so many things here. I believe it's slide 35 about your architecture CareCom. Slide. It's almost the same idea that Burke told us. Take care about when you're considering to describe an architecture. Your architecture, when I say, okay, architecture, let me see the details about the architecture here. But in fact, you have 2 pages about related work, but your architecture has only 2 pages too. In this case, the description about your architecture is only the design about your architecture, but I don't see you don't describe in a formal way or mathematical model or whatever about the components or the modules of your architecture in your manuscript. Maybe for the final version, it's possible to describe more details about each component that you have. For me, it's like I see like a draft. It's not architecture that you have the definition or mathematical model or formalization about your architecture. That's not, for me, it's not architecture. For me, it's a draft about your architecture. You need to offer more detail because someone needs to reproduce your architecture, or considering your architecture, for example, for develop a new solution, develop a new system, considering your CareCom architecture.
Okay.
If I correlate, for example, beat and palms, which part you see CareCom, or you can overlap palms and beat in your architecture?
Yes. So for most parts, Professor, I agree with you because the CareCom architecture, it is, as you called, or a draft or still a model, because we haven't implemented the components, or we are not sure about the techniques we are going to employ for each of the components. So of course I can describe them very meticulously. So and for the other question, I see, yes, some overlapping of the characteristics from beat and from PELS. They act on some of the same essential services, and I can connect them only conceptually right now. I really can't say, considering the architecture, and I guess that's what you are trying to say. You can't really touch the architecture, so it is not really related to beat and to PELS. But what we are trying to assure is the opposite. So we have beat, some insights for beat and for PELS, and what we are trying to achieve is using the knowledge we acquired from implementing beat and PELS in order to make CareCom a little more solid. So that's one of my ideas. So as you know, the beat implementation came prior to the CareCom architecture. So many of the issues we found, we discovered when we were implementing beat, we have already cared to development of CareCom, and we are planning to do the same thing considering PELS. But just to close, I agree with you. I can't consider CareCom an architecture right now because it's not ready, and we are not really sure. I don't have I can't really assure what techniques and what types of solutions I will employ in CareCom right now at this moment of development.
Okay, let's talk about your requirement. For example, you can consider security and performance, that's right? And in terms of security, you said security policy. When I see beat or other, you use security policy like rules you have used or not?
Maybe considering the broader aspect of security, Professor, because authentication can be employed can be related to the security policies, but we really haven't designed the security policies when we were implementing beat.
In terms of the access control, like IDS.
Yes, access control is directly related to beat. It is an authentication system, and although it is not an IDS, it highly collaborates to the detection intrusion, or it might collaborate because considering the authentication or the failed authentication, we can identify the intrusion detections. So what I can say is that even though BIT is not an IDS, it can perform tasks that related to an IDS. And considering access control, I'd say that it is highly related to access control. And also to the device management.
I believe you need to, maybe when you need so many routes that you need to improve your architecture or correlate your architecture, in order to be an architecture independent of your application. In this case, BT or whatever. That's in my opinion, don't have architecture. You have a draft. You have maybe many ideas, good ideas, but we don't have formalization. We don't have a mathematical model or whatever. You need to work about this. If you want to offer an architecture, in this model of architecture, one of the points that I looking for in your related work, how many possibilities there are in the literature in terms of the architecture? Why you decide the design? Why not a different design about this? Because I don't know, you discuss a lot about resilience, but we don't have many discussion about architecture design. Okay. Maybe it's not so important for you, maybe. Yes.
Yes, the works in the literature, they don't really consider architectures. I really haven't came across any work that considers designing and architecture, but I guess that is mainly due to the fact that the solutions provided in the related works, they are exclusive for a specific service layer. So my guess, I haven't really researched it. It was not within the scope of our work to research for the specific architectures, but I haven't came across any work that deals with an architecture considering the essential services that we have just provided.
Okay, maybe Michelle, you need to discuss a little more about this, but I believe it's possible to find a better solution, and a better design of the architecture, or that's important for your teams. In terms of you have a level, the middle level, a controller. One point that you see is the modules management. In this case, your idea about management is performance, is a configuration, is security. What kind of management in this case is? What function you need to think about it?
The main idea is that we need a kind of intermediate module to deal with the components, the other components in the resilience module, and that also deals with the communication with the requirements management module. So it would deal with the security and performance issues, of course, the communication regarding these characteristics, but also the solutions employed in the monitor, analyzer, and the adapter components.
One point, if you decide to continue in this direction, maybe you need to correlate your architecture with each next chapter in order to associate your architecture with each system that you have.
Okay.
You put there your design. Yeah, that's my framework. Here's my bit. My bit. This is similar to, or has the same function that monitor and analyze together. This part is similar to control.
Okay.
And we have some requirement. I use part of my requirement in this case. Bit on use on security access control, but not considering mobility or wherever. Maybe you need to correlate about your idea in the designing of your architecture, the system that tried to prove and in a certain way to answer your research question using your architecture like a base that you need to develop your idea.
Okay, I understand. Okay.
Because in that moment, I see two systems, but it's not so easy to correlate details about your care core architecture, about resilience and adaptive and cross-layer together. And cyber-physical system, in this case, cyber-human system, IOHT. And maybe we need to forget about intrusion. Depends, I don't know. You need to when the final manuscript, maybe I have answer for my questions at that point. Okay, but I'd like to see many answers. I'd like your final consideration, chapter 6. Your final consideration. Maybe you don't have so many time to describe more about your idea, but when I arrive here, and I'd like to see your answers for research question 1 and 2, and main question. But in this case, I don't see the answers for research question. You describe motivation again, but it's not clear your conclusion about your research question here in the final consideration.
In the manuscript.
Yes, in
Okay.
the manuscript. That I had until now. And why you decide to have an open issue and opportunity subsection? Because why did you decide in your final consideration, considering that you develop your qualification, you offer for us a subsection, the open issues, the opportunities. This opportunity is not for you?
That special part, Professor, what I tried to achieve was to link the open issues with the works we are going to perform next, because the timetable is just after that part, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know, because if you have so many points here, energy efficient, interoperability, scalability, flexibility, that point is important for resilience in architecture, for example. Those issues are important for your thesis?
No, they are just open issues.
My point here, I would like to see your open issues about your specifically about your research.
Okay.
And maybe in a final manuscript, I believe it's good because the open question. But what is open question for you? Maybe you have, I believe in one of the last slide you told me about your next works, but
yeah,
you don't have it here, and
no.
You offer for me for each one many other points. Your thesis is about energy. It's not an important point for you in that moment.
Okay,
that's right.
That's right.
Correct. Your research is about security. Maybe, depends, you need to define what is security for you, what is resilience, what is adaptive, whatever. I believe you have some, my point, you have a lot of ideas in your mind. Many of them you need to put together, put in your paper, but forget, for instance, develop your thesis, and after that, maybe you start to develop new ideas. That's a specific point. And the last question for you, and my curiosity, your solution considering, let me see, where I see here. In the contribution, you said me CareCon offers a dynamic adaptive use of proactive, reactive defense lines. And by monitoring update security performance requirements in face of threat. I don't see so much this point of the proactive reactive, and why you not considering tolerate only to proactive and reactive defense line? Why not tolerate? Tolerate is a kind of adaptive for you. Why only two lines, proactive and reactive? Why not use a tolerate or tolerance, depends in your solution?
Yeah, I have explained the tolerance attributes in the presentation, but I guess somehow I didn't mention it in the manuscript. But of course, Professor, I consider that tolerance is highly important, and we will have to employ tolerance because we don't have only proactive and reactive solutions. So most of the times we must deal somehow with the threats, and I mean, so tolerance will become an important part. And if it is not in the manuscript, I probably will add it later, for sure.
Okay. Maybe you need to start consider only two lines, because if you have three lines, maybe very difficult to know the performance of your solution, and after that to add a new perspective, in this case a new tolerance, because it's very difficult to control so many parameters together. And let me see, I believe slide third, the last question, 36 or 5?
36 or 5.
Or 5, let me see.
This is 5 and 6.
And it's 5.
5?
Yes. You said for us, you got to answer the question number 1. How do you know that you have answered this question? Why each guarantee, how guarantee is possible to prove for us that you answered this question correctly? Because you said, what are the key application requirements for modeling, blah, 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 etc. Okay. But how do you know that you have answer for me or for each one this question? Your answer is correct.
Well, I don't really know how to answer if the answer is correct, but the applications and the requirements for the adaptive communications was the ones we have researched and have just presented until the slide 20 something, if I'm not mistaken. So these are the key applications that we have defined, and also the requirements that we have identified. So we proposed to identify these applications and requirements, and we did identify them. About the correctness, I'm not so sure, Professor, but we said that we would identify the key applications and requirements, and we have identified them.
When you see this slide 34, maybe you have the requirements about your architecture, that's right? In previous slide?
Yeah, but these, Professor, are example of the requirements. The requirements are mentioned in this slide. So I have like this. Oh, so these are the requirements for each essential service. And these are the applications we have defined, and we also provided the categorization of the criticality on the IOHD applications.
So those requirements different about the others requirement that you see, that I see in the architecture. It's not.
Yes. I mean, in the architecture, Professor, they are mainly suggestions of services, because if we should consider all the existing services considering security, they will probably won't fit into the architecture itself. And as I said to Professor Burak, I already think that I provided too many security aspects, so I should diminish them and not to make it a wider range of security attributes.
I would like just to add, because I think the term requirements here is misused. I think the correct term is parameters, and then it comes back to some related works that Fernando has got from the literature, where some parameters are he defined and he configured. So I think this is my perspective, that it's not exactly requirements what Fernando wants to say here. I think he wants to say parameters.
I agree with you.
I let him to defend himself in that sense.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I finished here. No question for the moment.
Just to add up, Professor Michel, the term requirements is misleading. For sure, I can see that now, but I couldn't see when I designed the architecture. So, but the term is misleading. It shouldn't be requirements, because we have requirements in other parts of the work, and that creates a conflict. So sorry for that.
No worry. Okay, I finished. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Audrey. So now we go to the third part of this defense. I will ask Burak and Audrey to go to another room. I will give you the link. Just 1 minute.
I will stay in the room so that the live streaming don't stop, Professor.
Okay, thank you, Fernando. So I put here, no, yeah, it's fine. I put for you the link here in the private chat. I think you have, Burak, I think. I think you're.
I'm muted, sorry. Yes, I'm just switching to the other room now.
Okay, thank you. So for the others watching us, Fernando. So yeah, so we have discussed about your work, and in general, so we are approved. So you passed this qualification exam. However, we have so much work to do, as you have already observed. Few things that I will put in general terms is the definition of your focus for the thesis. So we'll need to define and redefine very well this scope and also the focus for the work. And another point is regarding to the analytical grounds that you need to develop as a doctor that you will be. So this is one thing that you need to to develop, and we will discuss about, is regarding to the mathematical models and analytical analysis that you need to have in your manuscript and in your work to prove the assumptions that you made. So those two are already so much work that we need to develop along these next months. Okay, so you are approved. Congratulations, and we discuss after the details. I will let for the other professors to congratulate you.
Congratulations, Fernando. You have a long way to go, and I'm pretty sure you're going to actually end up with a great thesis. I'm sure you're in good hands with your supervisor. So I have no doubts about it. Congratulations again. Yeah.
Thank you,
Yes,
Professor.
and congratulations, and keep the motivation this moment, and think about more targets, and take care about formalization and other things that you need, but keep the motivation. That's possible to finish and you have a great thesis for us, for you.
So I thank you again, Fernando, for all the efforts, and all the professors, Professor Bora Cantorsi from Ottawa University, and Professor Alder Santos from Federal University of Paraná. So thank you.
See you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.